Daycare workers, what is the most shocking family secret you've been told by a 3-year-old? If you are into gossip, then hanging around toddlers and kids is absolutely the way to go. They pick up on more than you realize, and they are brutally honest and tell it like it is. Why do you think Varys, the spider, master of whisperers, spy master for the king of the Seven Kingdoms, used a network of children to do all of his dirty work? They clearly have a talent in it. Story 1. Oh my, I can't believe this isn't one of the first ones that popped into my head. There was a little girl and boy, about 3 and 1. They were in foster care and had great foster parents. Well, they would get picked up about once a week by a social worker and taken to their parents for visits. Well, one time when they came back from the first unsupervised visit, the little 1-year-old started breathing really heavy and raspy, and then all of a sudden barely breathing at all. We think maybe an allergic reaction to something. Of course, we called an ambulance. Then not even 10 minutes after, he's off to the little 31 hospital. It happens to be the 3-year-old's. But she starts throwing up and then not being able to breathe. So we're all like, what the frick is going on? The owner goes to the hospital with the kids and calls later, then lets us know what's going on. Turns out the real parents poisoned both of the kids. They turned out okay. The little boy had a lot more in his system and was in the hospital for a few months. But overall, everything went back to normal. Needless to say, the parents went to prison. Their reason for doing it was because if they couldn't have them, then no one else was raising them, which made no sense because they were fairly close to getting them back. You never know how poopy parents some can be until you work in childcare. Story 2. I dated a girl with 2 kids. I was watching them while she went to the doctor. She had a serious medical problem, and she wanted the kids to not be there and see her all stressed out. Was watching Toy Story with her 3-year-old daughter. I guess the daughter started understanding that her mom and I are more than friends. She said, "Would you hit Mama?" I was shocked, and I said, "Of course not. What put that idea in your head?" And she teared up and said, "My daddy used to hit her." And she started crying. I just did my best. I explained to her that I would never hurt any of them, and how people who love each other should behave, and that her dad had a sickness that caused him to act strangely. He was an addict. I got her a popsicle, and she calmed down as Buzz Lightyear and Woody were flying into the car. I was aware that their dad hit their mom, but I didn't know the daughter witnessed it or would have even remembered. Story 3. So I worked in a day nursery for about 4 years or so, and I will never forget the day that a 3-year-old outed her mom and dad for having a intimate swing in their bedroom by drawing a pretty graphic picture of the swing and her mommy laying back in it and daddy kneeling down in front of her. We reported it to management because of policies and procedures, but my lord, I had to leave the room and laugh before I imploded. The same child, maybe 3 or 4 days later, pipes up during a conversation about religion. It was around Christmas time, so we were covering what religions have what festival and gods, etc. She announces that her mommy loves God very much and prays to him a lot at night. Without even thinking, we asked how she prayed. She responded by moaning and saying, "Oh my God, oh God, oh God, oh God, yes, I'm so close," and that she thought it was sweet. She felt so close to God. So that's how Immaculate Conception happens. You just have to pray really hard, and your wish will be granted. That swing sounds like fun too, but I thought those things usually belonged in dungeons, along with the other related apparatuses. But like I said, you gotta be discreet with these things, because kids will pick up on everything. Parents have the eyes in the back of their heads to see the shenanigans that kids are up to when they think that they're not being watched, but kids have eyes in the front of their head, just above their noses, and they are not shy about openly sticking those noses in everyone else's business. Story 4. They tell me everything. If you lie to your daycare worker, your child will spill the beans. I have lots of 3-year-olds struggling with potty training. Every single parent will tell me they're working with the child at home. Your kid will tell me if that's true or if you're just putting them in diapers as soon as you get home. Biggest thing I've been told, one little girl mentioned how her grandma tries to breastfeed her. Her grandma picked her up every day from daycare and had her just about all afternoon with her alone. We called parents and cops, An investigation was done, and Grandma admitted to holding her like she was nursing, but claimed they were just cuddling. From my conversation with the little one, it sounded like it was definitely going on. She was really, really detailed for an almost 3-year-old. Grandma walked away unscathed and still picked the little girl up from daycare regularly. Story 5. I once had a little girl tell me she saw Daddy licking Mommy like a doggy. That was hilarious and awkward. There were a handful of really sad cases where children would disclose neglect or abuse. One girl in particular had a meltdown one day when she had an accident in her underwear. Turned out that her mom would slap her around just gently enough to not leave a mark and lock her in a closet when she misbehaved, which included accidents. Needless to say, we reported the mother to CPS and did a rush job washing the girl's clothing so she could go home in the same clothes she wore to school without her mom knowing about the accident. Lots of kids spilling the beans on new pregnancies or divorces, arguments between parents, or infidelity. Kids see and hear a lot, and they tend to have incredibly good memories for that kind of stuff. Story 6. Not sure if this counts. Wife runs one, had a day off work, and a 6-year-old sits at the table next to me, and we start talking about different fish in the world. His parents were divorced, and they have split custody. He and his sister only come part-time. So I grab my phone, and we look up different tropical fish and whatnot. After a bit, he tells me he only likes his mom and sister, hates his dad, stepmom, and stepbrother. Talks about how he's going to light his dad's house on fire with the people he hates still in it. I told his stepmom about it when she came to pick him up. He went to therapy for a while. His real mom gets a new boyfriend every month or so. Apparently, one has given him swirlies a few times, and another was a convicted child molester. The dad reports this stuff to CPS, but they never do anything about it. Story 7. This isn't exactly scandalous. The shocking things I have heard usually involve abuse. We had a family from Texas move to daycare I worked at in Illinois. The boy would try and tell us stories, but we never could fully get all the details for it to make sense. It would usually go like this. You know who's bad? Who's bad? The black man. Who? The black man is bad. He hurts people. What man? Why does he hurt people? The black man. He's scary. After a few weeks of this, the boy was the one to always bring the black man topic up. I finally was able to discover that the black man was Darth Vader. I had assumed that perhaps this Southern family had a streak of racism, but it just turned out I was prejudiced against Southerners. This actually brings up a good point about the symbolism of good and evil, and especially when it comes to movies and such. The villain is often dressed in black, in an attempt to, I guess, make them appear menacing and make it really obvious that this is the character that's evil, or this is the bad guy. I'm sure it has something to do with day and night and predators lurking in dark shadows or something related to our evolutionary bias against our fear of dark figures. But in reality, an evil dude dressed in all white is just as evil. Take Saruman, for instance, the White Wizard from Lord of the Rings. But the representation of evildoers is definitely skewed towards black. I guess black is also the absence of color, which is a bit daunting, I suppose. And, yeah, I guess I'll admit, I really can't picture Darth Vader in a tie-dye suit being quite so ominous. Story 8. My grandma owns a home daycare, and a female toddler that she babysat decided to try and pull down a male toddler's pants and kiss his pee-pee. My grandma immediately asked her where she learned that, and she said, "My daddy." My grandma reported it, and an investigation was done, and her family was actually very grateful that she did. Even her dad. An investigation was done, and they found nothing wrong, and the parents 100% cooperated. Kids sometimes just say odd things, but they were glad to know that my grandma takes those sorts of things seriously. So I guess it's not a family secret, but my grandma certainly thought it could have been at the time. Story 9. I worked at a gym child care center in high school, and a pair of 4-year-old twins, one who appeared to be mentally disabled, with an older sister came in. Not 3 years old, but not very old. The little boy had these weird scars all over his arms and legs, like old cut marks healed over. The older girl, maybe 5 or 6, noticed me looking and calmly explained that it was from when his twin sister had gone after him with a knife and rolled up her sleeves to show me the same marks all over her arms. Apparently, the younger girl had serious issues, and her parents apologized for not warning me when they came to pick her up. Never saw them again. Creepiest little girl I've ever seen. Story 10. I had a kid call me a witch before and slap me on the face. That one was fun. He was in the foster system, so he had already been through some things, I'm sure. It wasn't a secret, but having a pair of 4 to 5-year-old sisters reveal to me the details of their father's motorcycle accident that led to his death was heartbreaking. It all starts with, "My daddy is dead," and ends with, "He wasn't wearing a helmet." Spoiler alert, the story is terribly tragic and lengthy. Oh, a girl who has a questionable home life pointed to a cop car and said, "It's the popo. They took mommy away once, and now I don't have a mommy anymore." Story 11. I don't know if this counts, but a 3-year-old told me he had belly aches every day because mommy gave him too much sleepy juice. I said, "What's that?" He didn't know. I brought it up to her, and she said like it was all normal and fine, even with a little laugh. Yeah, sometimes I give him a little bit too much NyQuil because the little doo-doo doesn't sleep. And I was like, no child that age should have any NyQuil. She laughed it off and said, "Oh, he's been getting it since he was a year old. Nothing bad has happened." And on top of that, the kids always came in smelling like strong weed. CPS was called. Story 12. Not a daycare worker, but something rather similar. I helped with foster children for a long time, and one who was in the process of being taken from her mother, 3 years old, told me, giggling, that Mel was sucking mommy's boob. Mel was her grandmother. She also told me that when she was a little tiny, her mom put her in a crib and a scary man came into the room and grabbed mommy and jumped all over her, while mommy screamed, "No, my baby is watching, stop." Story 13. When my son was 3, I bought my wife Titanic on video. Yes, it was a long time ago, for her birthday. He asked if he could watch it after nursery school. We said that it wasn't really a film for children. It was a film for grown-ups, like mommy and daddy. When I picked him up later, his nursery teacher was stifling her laughter as he had been telling everyone all day that it was his mom's birthday that day and that daddy had bought mommy a special video that only mommies and daddies could watch. Yes, a good qualifier to add to kids being keen, nosy, and honest is that they are also pretty ignorant when it comes to the finer details that life has to offer. So while they are keen at picking up on things you may have thought were well hidden, they can also easily misconstrue the overall story, and then you're left just trying to explain yourself to other adults to save yourself a bit of embarrassment. Story 14. Not really a shocking secret, but it got a laugh out of me. I had my preschoolers rounded up for circle time. Going off their interests of the day, I decided to ask who was a boy and who was a girl, since that's what happened to be the one thing every 3-year-old cared about that day. Through the sea of children, I hear a couple responses. "I'm a boy," "I'm a girl," etc. Then out of nowhere, all the way in the back, I hear, "I'm black." He sure was. God, I missed that class. Good times. Story 15. I once had CPS called on my parents because I told my daycare worker there was nothing to eat and I was starving. True story was my mom hadn't had time to get groceries and asked my dad to go before I left for daycare, saying something like, "Could you pick up the groceries? I don't want her to starve for another day tomorrow." I actually had breakfast that morning, but not the usual, and refused to eat it all. I never saw my mom so embarrassed ever again. Story 16. I teach 2-year-olds, and we were asking the kids what their parents' names were, just to see if they knew. I asked a little boy, "What's mommy's name?" He says, "Michelle." Then I asked, "What's daddy's name?" And he looks confused, as if he's trying to figure out the answer, but can't. So I ask, "What does mommy call daddy?" Assuming he would say John. Instead, he looked up at me and said, "Big Papa." I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Story 17. Not a secret and not a daycare worker, but I do work with young children at a private tutoring company. But a little girl, just turned 6, at my workplace, once turned to another girl who was being disruptive and calmly said, "Go and see a therapist, darling. You sound like you need one." It was hilarious at the time, but also kind of sad that the girl had heard that phrase often enough to be able to parrot it during an argument. Story 18. Not a daycare worker, but I used to have a tax practice. A client came into my office to drop off his tax paperwork with his 5 kids, ages 3 through 10, in tow. He said he needed to go run an errand and left, leaving the kids in my office for me to babysit while I worked on his taxes. The kids were shy, quiet, and well-behaved, but the youngest finally started a conversation with me. My daddy hits my mommy. Story 19. My mom was a teacher, and one time the fire department came in to educate the kindergarten kids. They asked the kids to name different things in the house that are hot: the stove, the fireplace, etc. Then one kid raises his hand and says, "The weed is hot." I don't think anything ever came of it. It was not the nicest neighborhood, and this kind of thing wasn't all that surprising. Story 20. I used to work at a church during the summer, and one time a little boy just up and told me as we were walking to the chapel that his daddy spanks his mommy with a wooden spoon after they go to bed. Obviously nothing illegal here, but it was a funny story, and the parents were informed that their little angel knew of their shenanigans and to have a talk with him. Story 21. With a group of 3-year-olds who we were coloring paper ties for Father's Day and talking about what their dads like to do. As the kids were calling out their dad's hobbies, one little girl had an epiphany. She gasped and shouted in excitement, "I have a dad!" She had recently been adopted by her foster parents. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.